October 12, 2016, 6:42 p.m. A crowded train platform in Kyoto. The loudspeaker crackles overhead, shoes shuffle against concrete. A businessman bows slightly as he apologizes into his phone. Two students laugh too loudly near the vending machines. The air carries the faint scent of rain and iron. And standing near the edge of the platform, hands folded loosely, gaze steady, is a man who has just decided he will never explain himself again. No announcement marks it. No one turns to look. But something irreversible has just occurred. He used to rehearse conversations in his head before they happened, used to measure his tone carefully, adjust his posture, soften his opinions. His personality had been a negotiation calibrated for harmony, safety, acceptance. Tonight that negotiation ends. You wouldn't notice it by looking at him. He hasn't shaved his beard, he hasn't changed his clothes, he isn't angry, he isn't triumphant. If anything, he looks calmer. The train approaches, wind gathers along the platform's edge, lifting the hems of coats and tugging at loose scarves. You can almost feel it against your own skin. He does not reach for his phone. He does not rehearse tomorrow's conversations. He simply stands. From a Jungian perspective, this is the beginning of individuation, though no one around him would use that word. It is the moment when the ego, long trained to bargain for approval, begins withdrawing its bids. What looks like withdrawal from the outside is, internally, a restructuring of identity. The doors open with a hydraulic sigh. Inside, faces glow blue from screens. He steps in, finds a place near the window, and watches his reflection flicker against the passing lights of the city. For years, his reflection had felt like a role, the agreeable one, the reliable one, the one who keeps the peace. He wore these qualities like medals earned in childhood, polished in adolescence, perfected in adulthood. But medals are heavy. And tonight he feels their weight fall away. You can almost sense the silence expanding around him, not awkward, not tense, just unoccupied. He remembers the last argument he had 3 weeks earlier, how he had begun explaining himself mid-sentence, justifying a boundary he wasn't even sure he wanted to defend. How quickly he had folded when the other person frowned. That memory no longer burns. It feels distant, as if it belongs to someone else. The train slows at the next station, more people enter, a child cries, a woman checks her watch, the world continues in its usual rhythm. Inside him, something has shifted gears. Carl Jung believed that individuation often begins quietly, not with rebellion but with recognition. Recognition that the persona, the social mask carefully crafted for belonging, is not the entirety of the self. And once you see the mask clearly, you can't fully reattach it. He doesn't feel superior, he doesn't feel detached from humanity. In fact, he feels more present than ever. But he no longer feels the need to adjust himself to be digestible. The difference is subtle. Earlier in the day, his colleague had misunderstood him during a meeting. There had been a moment, the familiar tightening in his chest, the urge to clarify, soften, appease. He didn't. He let the misunderstanding stand. And something surprising happened. Nothing collapsed. No one attacked him, no social exile followed, the room moved on. He realized then that much of his self-explanation had been preemptive, a defense against threats that rarely materialized. And that defense had been loud. Not in volume but in mental noise, constant calibrations, micro-adjustments, invisible negotiations. Tonight, as the train glides past illuminated apartment windows, he senses how tired he has been. Tired of narrating himself. Tired of translating his inner world into socially acceptable fragments. You felt this before, haven't you? That strange fatigue that doesn't come from work, but from presentation. The exhaustion of being understandable. He rests his forehead lightly against the glass. Outside, neon signs blur into streaks of color. He doesn't feel smaller. He feels consolidated. From a Jungian perspective, this consolidation is energy returning inward. No longer projected into maintaining an image, it begins fortifying something quieter, something rooted. It's not that he has stopped caring about others. He has stopped outsourcing his self-definition to them. The train enters a tunnel, darkness swallows the windows, For a moment, the reflection becomes clearer than the outside world. He looks at himself directly. And for the first time, there is no urge to adjust what he sees. No correction. No apology. Just recognition. But individuation is not peaceful at first. Because as the persona loosens, something else begins to surface, the parts long suppressed to maintain harmony. The silence he feels tonight is not empty. It is full of something approaching. Something that has been waiting. And it will demand more from him than quiet ever did. November 3, 2016, 11:18. His apartment lights off except for the kitchen stove. The city outside has gone still. A single taxi passes below, tires hissing against wet pavement. The refrigerator hums. Somewhere in the building, a door shuts softly. He sits at the kitchen table in the dark. No phone. No television. No distraction. The silence is no longer peaceful. It presses. This is the part no one talks about. When the social negotiator, the part of you that smooths edges and anticipates reactions, begins to dissolve, it does not leave quietly. It protests, it scans for danger, it whispers predictions. You're going to lose people. They'll think you've changed. They'll misunderstand you. His jaw tightens, the old reflex returns, prepare a speech, craft an explanation, preempt the discomfort. But there is nothing specific to defend against. That's what makes it unbearable. From a Jungian perspective, when the persona weakens, the unconscious compensates. The shadow, those disowned traits, impulses, enjeurs, and ambitions begins surfacing, not dramatically, not destructively. Just honestly. He realizes something unsettling. He has been kinder than he wanted to be. More agreeable than he felt. More flexible than his convictions allowed. Not because he was false, but because he feared the cost of being firm. The stove light flickers slightly. He stares at his hands resting on the table. They look steady. Inside, however, something is rearranging itself. Earlier that afternoon, his sister had called. She mentioned casually that he seemed different lately, not in a critical tone, just curious. In the past, he would have reassured her, laughed, explained, offered context to prevent distance. Instead, he said only, maybe. The word lingered on the line longer than he expected. She shifted the conversation. They moved on, but the space between them felt altered. He had not filled it. And that restraint now echoes in this dark kitchen. Because here is the truth: when you stop explaining yourself, you also stop controlling how others perceive you. That loss of control feels like exposure. Carl Jung believed that individuation demands sacrifice, specifically the sacrifice of collective approval. The tribe, whether family, friends, or colleagues, often prefers predictability. It stabilizes the group. A person who stops negotiating becomes unpredictable. Not chaotic. Just self-contained. And self-containment can feel threatening to those who relied on your availability. He stands and walks to the window. The glass is cold. The streetlight casts a pale halo on the pavement below. For years, he thought maturity meant being understood. Now he sees it differently. Maturity may mean tolerating misunderstanding. He inhales slowly. The air feels heavier tonight. Because beneath the calm exterior, grief is surfacing. Not grief for others. Grief for the version of himself that survived by adapting. That younger self had been vigilant, sensitive to tone shifts, skilled at reading rooms, hyper-aware of tension. That vigilance had kept relationships intact. It had also fragmented him. You can almost feel the internal fracture, one part scanning the environment, the other quietly asking, "But what do I want?" The negotiator had always answered first. Now the second voice is louder. And it is not gentle. It says no more often. It resists unnecessary apologies. It refuses to over-explain boundaries. But every refusal comes with a tremor of doubt. At 11:43 p.m., his phone lights up on the table behind him. A message from a colleague: "Hey, did I upset you earlier? You seemed distant." He stares at the notification from across the room. This is the old crossroads. He could immediately reassure, overcorrect, add warmth to soften the shift. Or he could let the question sit. Not as punishment, not as manipulation, simply as truth. He walks back to the table and picks up the phone, his thumbs hover over the keyboard. He types no, just thinking. And sends it. No elaboration. The simplicity feels almost radical. Seconds pass, no reply. The negotiator inside him flares again. You should clarify. You sound cold. They'll misinterpret that. But he places the phone face down. And waits. Waiting is new. Waiting without fixing. From a Jungian perspective, this waiting is integration in motion, the ego learning to tolerate uncertainty without dissolving into performance. The refrigerator hum grows louder in the silence. He notices something unexpected. Beneath the anxiety is relief. A lightness. Because every time he resists unnecessary explanation, energy returns to him. Energy once spent curating perception. He realizes he is not becoming quieter because he has less to say. He is becoming quieter because fewer words are required to stabilize himself. The negotiator is not dead. But it is no longer in command. And yet, as the minutes stretch and the phone remains silent, another question begins forming. If he no longer explains himself, who will remain? December 21st, 2016, 5:31 a.m. Winter solstice, a park bench overlooking the Kamo River. The sky is still dark, but the horizon is beginning to soften, a faint line of silver separating earth from sky. Frost clings to the wooden slats of the bench. His breath leaves his mouth in quiet clouds. He comes here now most mornings. Not to think. Not to escape. Just to sit. The river moves slowly beneath the thin veil of early light. No one else is awake except an elderly man walking a small white dog along the path. The dog pauses, sniffing the frozen grass, then continues. You can almost feel the cold settling into your own bones. He used to fill mornings like this with noise, podcasts, messages, news updates, something to occupy the mind before the day made its demands. Now he lets the quiet arrive first. And in that quiet, something surprising has happened. Not emptiness. Not isolation. But clarity. When he stopped explaining himself, some people did drift slightly, conversations shortened, invitations became less frequent, the subtle social recalibrations were real. But not catastrophic. A few relationships unexpectedly deepened. One friend, the kind who speaks slowly and listens fully, seemed unfazed by the change. In fact, he leaned in, their conversations grew more spacious, fewer words, longer pauses. It turns out that when you stop performing warmth, what remains is either genuine connection or nothing at all. And nothing, he has learned, is survivable. Carl Jung believed that individuation narrows your psychological audience. Not everyone will recognize the version of you that emerges without the mask, and that narrowing can feel like loss. But it is also refinement. The sky shifts from silver to pale blue, a bird crosses the river in a sudden clean arc. He remembers something from years ago, a childhood memory he hadn't revisited in decades. He is 8 years old, sitting at a family dinner. His father corrects him mid-sentence, dismissing an opinion with a small laugh. The table laughs too, not cruelly, just casually. He learns something in that moment. Soften. Adjust. Be agreeable. The negotiator was born there, not from weakness but from intelligence. From a Jungian perspective, the persona often forms in response to subtle wounds. It protects belonging, it ensures safety. But it also freezes development at the age of its creation. He inhales sharply, the cold air sharpening his lungs. He is not angry at that child. He is grateful. That child navigated complex emotional terrain with remarkable skill. But he is no longer 8. And he no longer needs the same armor. The sun finally breaks the horizon, not dramatically, just enough to warm the edge of the river with gold. The frost on the bench begins to dissolve. You can almost feel the thaw. He notices how his body sits now, grounded, shoulders relaxed, no forward lean of anticipation, no subtle contraction of readiness. Just presence. And in this presence, another realization surfaces. He is not quieter because he has withdrawn from life. He is quieter because he is no longer arguing internally. The constant inner debate, how to be perceived, how to respond, how to adjust, has faded. Silence used to feel like absence. Now it feels like alignment. A jogger passes by, shoes striking rhythmically against the pavement. For a moment, their eyes meet, a brief nod, no performance, no explanation. It is enough. There is a cost to this path. He knows it. Some will misinterpret the quiet as distance. Others will test it, pushing for the old version of him to reappear, the agreeable mediator, the emotional translator. But something fundamental has shifted. The ego no longer negotiates for approval. It negotiates for integrity. And integrity speaks less. The phone in his coat pocket vibrates softly. A message from his sister. "I think I get it now, you seem steadier." He reads it twice. Steadier. Not colder. Not distant. Steadier. He slips the phone back into his pocket without replying immediately. Not because he doesn't care, but because he doesn't need to respond instantly to stabilize the connection. He watches the river instead. And for the first time in years, the quiet does not feel like something he is enduring. It feels like something he owns. But individuation is not a final destination. It is an ongoing reorganization. And as the light spreads across the water, another question forms, quieter but deeper than before. If silence is no longer defense, what then will he choose to speak for?